This kind of game's enough to make you wonder whether we'll ever see England win a Test match in Australia again.
The engine room, you could call them, Pope, Root and Brook, they let England down.
But essentially the most Bazball innings was Travis Head whacking this 100 everywhere, showing you could play in an aggressive manner.
It just got too much for them.
That will be an innings that is replayed on Australian TV forever.
England fans might be slightly fearful that we're in a situation where Zak Crawley is essentially undroppable for this series.
They have got something to cling on to there. It's going to be a low-scoring series, we can see that.
This sounds a grim thing to say as an Englishman. They might emerge in Brisbane a much better side.
This tour will spiral very, very quickly.
Hi, Stuart Broad here. I'm here with Laithwaite's Wine, the proud sponsor of the Telegraph's cricket podcast. Check out my Beyond the Wicket range of wines at Laithwaite's, inspired by my memories travelling the world playing this incredible sport we love. Visit laithwaites.co.uk for more details.
Hello and welcome to the Telegraph Cricket Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Goodwill, and I'm joined once again by our chief cricket correspondent, Nick Holt.
Hi, Jake.
And our cricket news correspondent, Will McPherson.
Hello, Jake.
Well, guys, I think it's fair to say we were not expecting to be recording a podcast again so soon, but somehow the first Ashes test has only lasted 2 days. England have lost. But firstly, before we get into how that all happened, Nick, I just want to get a sense for what the feeling is out on the ground in Perth.
Stunned, I think, both sides. There's some pretty stunned Australian fans walking around as well. Can't believe what they've seen. This morning, Will was actually chatting to one of the tour group organisers who was telling him that he'd had people coming up to him after the first day saying, can we extend our holiday? Can we stay longer? We want to see more of this. I suspect they're probably heading for the airport now.
Yeah, that feels about right. And Will, just give us a little bit of insight into what it's like to try and cover a topsy-turvy, quickly changing back and forth test match like that.
It was truly mental. It covered a few Ashes tests in Australia now, still not seeing England win. Yet day one was incredible. It was so easy to get caught up in kind of the magic of day one. Mitchell Starc bowling so brilliantly. England 172 didn't look like much of a score at all. And then England's bowlers responded so well. And by the end of the day, England were well on top. But you kind of know there's always a twist in the tail. But by lunch today, on day two, England were kind of more than noses in front. They were about 100 runs ahead. They had 9 second innings wickets in hand. And yet they still let the game slip. It's unbelievable. It's enough to make you wonder. This kind of game is enough to make you wonder whether we'll ever see England win a Test match in Australia again. It was absolutely incredible. This one will sting. This should sting them and will sting England fans a lot because they had the game in the palm of their hands. They had Australia on the ropes and they couldn't land the knockout blow. That is a theme of this team, and it's a killer for them. It's a long way back from 1-0 down in Australia when you don't hold the Ashes, and it could become a long tour from here, I fear.
Absolutely. Right, well, let's get into it in a bit more detail. England 1-0 down in the Ashes after blowing a golden opportunity. Right, well, I think the first question I have for you, Nick, really is how did England let that game get away from them and get away from them so quickly?
Because they didn't play the situation. When they were on top, they were going through a little bit of a tough patch. They did fight through to lunch, a tricky last half hour when the run rate dipped quite low for this team, and they survived that without losing any wickets. Duckett and Pope, they'd done pretty well at that point, really. But Duckett was struggling. He took a pretty bad blow on the elbow and he looked uncomfortable just before he got out. But still, England were in charge of the game, but they just could not see through that difficult period. It was obvious what Scott Boland was doing or what Australia were doing. They were just hanging the ball out in that fifth stump channel, waiting for the England mistake. And the engine room, you could call them, Pope, Root and Brook, they let England down. They threw it away. And I don't think there was really any way back for them after that. You could have taken... The Perth Stadium's got this amazing concourse where you can walk around the whole ground pretty quickly, actually, because it's so wide without having to fight your way through the crowds. And I think if you'd have walked around the ground in one go, you'd have missed most of England's batting disappearing. And it was just... You could just sense that they were not able, really, to recover from that. And I had no surprise that England were thumped in the end. I've seen this so many times in Australia, and I just thought they've let this one slip, and the bowlers will not be able to drag it back.
It feels like to me there is a lot of, well, beyond disappointment, almost anger at how quickly that got away and what a big chance there was. I mean, Will, do you feel like that is how the England camp themselves will be feeling, or will it all be very much let's go again, lads? Couple of extra rounds of golf. Here we go.
The noises out of the England camp were that they were hurting and things like that. Ben Stokes, Nick and I were talking on the way back from the ground, and Bet and Nick, both of us have covered large chunks of his career. Nick's done the whole thing. We agree that we've never seen him as kind of downcast as that, and that he's had one of the most up and down careers you can imagine. But their approach will probably be more of the same. I mean, it's an unbelievable amount of time in terms of modern schedules. Unbelievable amount of time until the next one now. 11 days tomorrow, so it's 12 today. But once the debrief happens, I was down pitch side doing some interviews at the end, and you could sort of had an eye on some of the players while they were kind of having their post match feed and things like that, and they looked pretty down. I think the worrying thing is how many of them. Some of them had poor games throughout. So Zak Crawley has a really iffy record, full stop. Joe Root has a really iffy record in Australia. Both of them had really, really poor games. So they've got a lot to think about. But then you've got guys like Gus Atkinson and Mark Wood, who actually did plenty right. Didn't fail to take a wicket. And by the end, we're getting absolute pongoed. Atkinson was really on the end of heads, kind of late onslaught. It was, to be honest, it wasn't any great reflection of his bowling. To be honest, I didn't think he was having a mare, but he took some treatment. Neither of them took a wicket. How are they going to feel? There's a long time to reflect on this one. Now, England, kind of, I don't know. If you were being very positive today, you'd say the kind of magic of this management team of Stokes and McCullum has been keeping the team level in these kind of situations, and meaning that they could bounce back. But this would be, it would be an extraordinary. It's a long way back from here. It's really tricky to keep morale high. Yes, I've no doubt there'll be some golf. They'll clear off to. They've got 3 days in Perth now. Then they'll go to Brisbane on Wednesday. I don't expect many of them to play in the game in Canberra.
So, Nick, how much of England's collapse on day 2 do you put down to good bowling, and how much of it do you think was just poor batting in the end?
I think most of it was poor batting. Obviously, some good bowling. Boland had a lot more oomph today. Nip off the pitch and bowl a much better length. He didn't let England knock him off his length as well, like they did on day 1. Maybe he was just a bit nervous leading the attack without Cummins and Hazelwood. I don't know. Stark was brilliant all the way through the game. But England should be good enough to handle that. They should be good enough to fight their way through that. But nobody really had the stomach for it. That's such an important stage of the series, pivotal moment, and with the chance to win the first opening test of an Ashes series in Australia for 40 years, and their first for 15 years in total. I think it just got too much for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the one thing we should mention, we probably have not gone into as much detail yet so far, is that Travis Head innings. Now, Australia being set 205, which would have been the highest score of the game so far. He ends up opening with Khawaja, ruled out to open for a second time, but after a successful week on the golf course. Just how good an innings do you think that Head knock was, Will?
It was phenomenal. One of the best I've seen easily. That will be an innings that is replayed on Australian TV forever. They're very good at clipping up highlights packages and things like that, and it will go down with, Adam Gilchrist here in 2006 and things like that. It's just one that they keep replaying forever and ever. It was such a. I was watching Jake Weatherall for the last 5 minutes of the tea break, was down on the boundary waiting for his opening partner, and because we didn't know, no one knew who that opening partner was going to be. Weatherall's on debut. The poor fella had made a 2-ball duck and actually he'd been sort of embarrassed by Jofra Archer a bit in the first innings because he was LBW and put on his backside as well. So the bloke must have been so nervous. Marnus had opened with him in the first innings because of Khawaja's back spasms. This time it appears Khawaja's back spasms have got worse. So we were wondering who it would be. And I think in the press box, the general feeling was that it had to be Head or Alex Carey, and someone who could actually, in essence, someone who could put a bit of pressure back on England, because in a smallish chase like that, not tiny but not massive, you can break the back of it quite quickly. Head was the perfect option. He walked out at the very last minute. England were in the middle by the time Head emerged. It turned out that they'd had some discussions about Nathan Lyon opening the batting. Which is incredible, really. Not least because Lyon's got some injuries of his own. But it was Head who came out to open. He faced the first ball. England had bowled like the wind in the first innings. Genuinely, people here last night were quite rattled by the way England had bowled at Australia in the first innings. It was the fact that it was a collective effort. 4 guys bowling, in their language, above 140 kph, which is, kind of that 87, 88 mark, which is properly quick. And then Ben Stokes is Ben Stokes. So they thought 5-man attack. This could be a long, long summer. Head was sensible early on. Archer, Atkinson, they bowled quite well early doors, but he was respectful. And then once he got going, he was completely unstoppable. I suppose what I would say is the thing that is most, I would say, for England fans, depressing would be the word, is quite how close Australia were to the canvas today. They were in a bad way. Khawaja and Lyon, their 2 oldest players, were injured. They were looking old in the field. Boland was struggling. Weatherall had got a duck in his first innings. Marnus and Smith had been kept quiet. By the end of the day, they've still got massive question marks over Khawaja, but they've got an answer if they want it in Travis Head as an opener. Weatherall's got some runs. Labuschagne's got some runs, but Boland's got some wickets. Doggett had a pretty good game. Some of the wickets he took were quite soft, but he looks a really good bowler to me. They've kind of just... They might emerge at Brisbane. This sounds a grim thing to say as an Englishman. They might emerge in Brisbane a much better side. Pat Cummins says he's kind of 50-50 to play. There's some doubt over whether Josh Hazlewood will be seen this side of Christmas at best. But that's unconfirmed as yet. I think Australia could be a much better team, and also they've thrown some punches at England. They scored at 7 runs and over in that innings. It's incredible. That if I'm sat there as an England fan, that's what I'm most concerned about. And they were so close. The bloodletting was very nearly beginning today, for Australia, but it wasn't quite to be.
The other thing, which is I think the key point there, is England's batting approach has taken a lot of criticism for them throwing away the wickets, but essentially the most Bazball innings was Travis Head whacking this 100 everywhere, showing you could play in an aggressive manner, and in fact, arguably showing it was perhaps even the right way to go about it, which just begs the question: was England's batting a skill problem rather than actually a approach problem?
I'll come in here. I'll say I have 2 issues with that. Ben Stokes said he kind of, what the essence of what he was saying was that Head's innings kind of justified the way England went about it. And what I would say about that is the thing I mentioned about Head just taking a moment at the start of the innings. He didn't blaze from ball 1, but he did get a 70 ball 100. He took a moment, he took a breath, and England had a moment after lunch where there was an opportunity to take a breath. Scott Boland produced his first really outstanding bit of skill of the match to get Ben Duckett out. He softened him up before lunch and he got him out after lunch. Duckett was on the ropes and he got him out. At that point, Ollie Pope, he's been vice captain for a couple of years. He's obviously not now, but he's an experienced Test cricketer, 60 odd tests. He had to take a moment there, just take some deep breaths. And, if you let Boland bowl at you for a bit, well, that's fine. He didn't. He had a huge drive outside off stump. 3 balls later, Harry Brook does the same. Worst of all, probably, Joe Root does the same as well.
Hi, Stuart Broad here. I really hope you're enjoying the Telegraph's Cricket Podcast, proudly sponsored by Laithwaite's Wine. Laithwaite's has an incredible range of wines, from big, bold reds to crisp, refreshing whites and everything in between. Perfect for any occasion, delivered straight to your door. And now my very own range, Beyond the Wicket, is available at Laithwaite's too. It's 6 great wines, 2 whites, 2 reds, a rosé and an English sparkling. Each inspired by my memories touring the world playing this incredible sport. Laithwaite stop at nothing to find the best wines from around the world. So, get ready for a great delivery, on and off the pitch. Visit laithwaites.co.uk and raise a glass to great cricket and great wine.
So as we've discussed, obviously, no Pat Cummins, no Josh Hazlewood, and England still could not execute their batting skills. They've got a pink ball test to come, possibly at least one and both of those players to return later on in the series. I think a lot of England fans are now asking, is there any way back for England?
Yes, there is. If they learn from this, if they digest it, if they get some proper preparation put in before the first test, they've got plenty of time. They've got a Prime Minister's 11 2-day game with a pink ball in Canberra. The top 7 should be playing in that. They were undercooked in this game, and it showed. They need to play in that game and get some work and some time at the crease under their belt. I've always thought that the strength of this England team is that they're the one that I've covered in Australia, that if they go 1-0 down, they have the power to come back because they have utter self-belief in what they do. Now, that was before they lost like this, and in this manner, and in such a galling way when they were in such a strong position. That is going to take something else, something we've not seen before from an England team. It's a huge, huge challenge, but they've got to have hope. If they don't, this tour will spiral very, very quickly, and it will end as bad as all the last 3 that we've had in Australia, and the whole sort of Bazball project, as we call it, it could blow up in smoke.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the fact they came back from 2-0 down to at least draw in the last Ashes will also be a little bit of consolation. Before we get into England's bowling, which is very much a kind of tale of 2 innings, well, I wanted to ask about Joe Root in particular. Now, with all the talk about him not having scored 100 down under, there was great expectation on him that he would put that to one side and be the kind of masterful batsman that he has been over recent periods. He looked shaky, only scoring 8 runs across the 2 innings, and frankly, I don't think many people would have thought England would win the first test with Joe Root only scoring 8 runs across 2 innings. Are you concerned for him and how he looks?
Yes, I am. In short, he's the one player who kind of doesn't necessarily fit in his batting order in a couple of ways. One, he's the sort of sensible guy, the designated driver, but he's also the guy who benefits from time at the crease and building up. The others sort of they're a bit more laissez-faire in their attitude, whereas Root is a serious trainer, and he loves the kind of slowly building up towards the series. They don't do that anymore. He struggled in the New Zealand ODI series. The ball was nipping around there. It was quite a different scene to what kind of Ashes cricket over here, the cauldron of Ashes cricket, if you like. But he had a quietish warm-up game at Lilac Hill. I think he needs a game. Nick suggested going down to Canberra for Prime Minister 11. Look, we might get more on that in the next couple of days, but I'd be surprised if many of those first teamers are there. I don't think that's the right approach either. I'm not advocating some kind of naughty boy net situation. It's those days are gone, but there's a long time before the next test. I was worried about Root. I thought any right-hander could have got out to the ball that Stark bowled him in the first innings, but he was getting fidgety and trying to score when he didn't need to. And in the second innings, it was, as I sort of said earlier, it's probably the worst of a lot. Really unnecessary shot. Stark had been brought back to bowl at him and Stokes, and he served up his wicket on a plate. So it was a concerning performance, and it looked like a man who knew the statistic. He's been asked about it a lot, but he didn't look like he could block it out of his mind at this point. There's two innings down, potentially 8 to go. I'm less confident about him making that 100 than I was before this test match. So yeah, it wasn't a great show from Root.
No, and the other batsman I'm keen to talk about specifically, Nick, is Zak Crawley, who ended up with his first pair for England. What a time to do it. I think the slight concern there is that there is no opening batsman travelling with the squad, or no specialist. So I think some England fans might be slightly fearful that we're in a situation where Zak Crawley is essentially undroppable for this series. Is that how you see it, or do you think there could be changes if he really struggles again in the next test?
Well, if they're dropping Zak Crawley, then the series is then it's probably over for them, really, because they haven't really got anyone else. They're going to have to press Bethel into opening. They picked this squad with a Lions team as backup. That was their plan. They've backed themselves into a corner with Crawley, the same with Pope. They haven't made that decision when it's been presented to the opportunity's been presented to them over the past 2 years. They're stuck by these guys, and they're always going to be judged on those decisions in Australia. And so far, it's not working out too well. I disagree a bit with Will a little bit. I think they do need to go to Canberra. I think they tried to wing it in this Test match in the biggest game of all, and it's really bit them. And if they do that again, it's going to be 2-0.
On the one hand, you have the England batsmen who didn't get in at all, didn't get going, basically contributed nothing. On the other hand, you've got Ben Duckett and Ollie Pope, who've got 2 starts apiece, actually got in relatively long on that pitch compared to the rest of the batsmen in the game, but none of them scored a 50. Are they almost more at fault for the defeat, having got in repeatedly and not managing to get a score, or is that being unfair, and is it really the guys who didn't get going at all that should be shouldering more of the blame here, Will?
I think you sort of in that you kind of look at how they got out. I don't give Duckett too much blame, although in the first innings I suppose you could just say he missed a straight ball, which is his absolute bread and butter. Second innings today, I felt he was dismissed. Pope, really loose dismissal today. He was a bit more in as well. He kind of, both innings. He 40-ish, 30-ish. The worry with Pope is could that be his ceiling against Australia? He got in the first innings. He got 1 run past his best score against them, and then got out. And his average came into the series with an average of below 16 against Australia. It would have gone up a little bit now, but not by masses. We sort of said before the series, Pope tends to start series pretty well. I hope we haven't seen the best of him in this series. He looks a bit more composed, a bit more organised, a bit tighter. People were optimistic after watching him at Lilac Hill, but yeah, it was a horrible dismissal today, and I think it's the one that kind of set the collapse in motion, really. There had already been a wicket, so it wasn't the first wicket of a collapse, but it's the one that kind of suddenly you're looking around going, oh wow, this could get ugly. And actually, as it happened, England lost their next 2 wickets without adding another run after Pope got out. So yeah, slightly worried about that. I think I'd add that I'd throw a left field shout in the mix for the Crawley situation, which is Will Jacks. He is in the squad as this kind of bizarre utility player. I don't think Crawley's obviously going to play in Brisbane. He's going to be heartily backed by the selectors. But the bizarre thing about Crawley is it's not impossible. He goes and gets a pair again and fails to get out of either of Mitchell Starc's first overs. It really doesn't feel impossible. So if that's the case, then I could maybe Jacks would provide a spin option whilst opening the batting.
If you'd have said to me before the series starts, write your worst case scenario list, which looking back maybe we should have done. A pair for Crawley and the prospect of Will Jacks coming in to open the batting would have been a good entry to have as number 1, I think, and number 2 would be Joe Root having the Test match he's just had, the stinker that it was.
Yeah, well, maybe there'll be a blessing in disguise in there for England. After all, Khawaja not opening in either innings for Australia probably was definitely not their plan either, but that seemed to land okay in the end. I just wanted to talk a bit about England's bowling. After the first innings, I think everyone was purring basically over England's attack. I think, Nick, you wrote they basically had Australia running scared, 5 quicks coming at them. They looked fantastic, whereas in the first Australia innings, Stark looked a cut above the rest. England just kept going at them. Are you still feeling positive about England's attack, having seen what Travis Head just did to them, taking into account the first innings? Where are you kind of at with England's overall seam performance?
I think if they can shake off the sort of damage and perhaps just reflect on it as being one of those things that they were beaten by 1 man in the end, not by an Australian team batting performance. It was just 1 man. Then yes, they've got that unrelenting 4-pronged pace attack with Stokes, the 5th option as well. It was England's best bowler last summer. They've got pace, they've got accuracy generally when they don't try and be too clever, and they've got Josh Tongue as backup. So yes, they have opened up some cracks in that Australian team in this Test match, and there were a lot of stunned Australian voices this morning knocking around. They'd not seen their own team beaten up like that before, or certainly for many, many years.
I think the term is rattled.
Rattled, yeah, absolutely. Worse than that, really. And so they have got something to cling on to there. It's going to be a low-scoring series. We can see that. We always thought that would be the case, partly because of the pitches, but also because of the frailty of both batting lineups. So yeah, the bowlers can take a lot from this game, despite what happened today. They just need the batsmen to do them a favour.
One thing I'll just add on the bowlers as well. They in the first innings, when they were batting, they got properly blown away themselves, and I was a bit fearful that might be a theme of the series. That England were 6 down, all out kind of thing. But Atkinson and Carse showed some real character with the bat today. I thought Carse had a very good Test match overall. Actually, I think he looks kind of, despite being a bloke with a Zimbabwean father who was born in Port Elizabeth, he kind of looks born for Ashes battle, doesn't he? He's a tough fella, and I suspect he's going to get in a few scrapes in this series. But he had a decent game, 5 wickets overall. So that's something that at least they didn't get totally. Australia won't be quite as quick to go to that short ball ploy at England's tail straight away, I don't think. But that's clutching at positives, they're just that there aren't really there. But yeah, the bowling on day one was exceptional. The worry is that it didn't take long for Head to get on top of them today, and I think there was a lot of observations among Australian broadcasters about kind of the drop in speeds for England. It wasn't absolutely outrageous drops in speed, and sometimes, if for the last 50 or 60 runs, let's face it, that game was gone, and maybe you're not quite putting in at absolute full pace there. But yeah, it was a bit worrying that some of that good work from day one was undone today.
Absolutely. And it feels like, overall, I think we all agree that this was a pretty hope-destroying second day. But if we're trying to be positive, I'll ask both of you for one thing that we should cling on to, or England should cling on to, is why they could potentially get back into the series. If there's one thing you can hang your hat on, Will, I'll come to you first. What do you think is the one thing England fans should be focusing on if they're trying to stay positive?
I just don't think. I think Australia have won the game today because England have thrown it away, and Travis Head has played an all-time great innings. They as I say, they were teetering earlier. They were really, really teetering on the edge. They were one more bad hour probably for Australia, or one more even hour from being out of the Test match, and there was a lot of kind of sniping going on. A sense that there was a story bubbling up among our Australian counterparts. To be honest, it never came to pass. They've won an extraordinary Test match. Fair play to them. There can be zero complaints from an English perspective, but there are cracks in Australian cricket generally, I think, at the moment. If England were to have 2 good days in Brisbane rather than having kind of a good session here and there like they did in Perth, I think those kind of little cracks could be opened up again. But maybe I'm clutching at this stage.
And you, Nick?
Well, I think that pace attack, the way that Archer bowled on the first day, the way that Wood shook them up, the way that Carse backed them up with a pink ball, if they bowl at the right time. I mean, it's all about managing when you bowl in a pink ball Test match. There is a randomness to it, really. If they can be bowling at the right time under the lights, then they can blow this Australian team away. Of course they can. So there is, of course, they've got that to clutch onto. Then they must do. Otherwise, they're going to go the same way as all the predecessors over here. Stokes, McCullum, let's face it, they take the positives from any kind of situation. They've got to work some magic.
That they do. Okay, well, look, let's get into some of your questions, and thanks to all of you who've sent those in. Well, to be honest, we got this question from a lot of different people, so we kind of combined it together. But essentially, the thrust of it was, what would have to happen over the next few weeks and months for the McCullum, Stokes and Key axis to be sacked and removed? Will?
I think more of this. I think if it went the same way as this, and let's face it, there's not going to be many draws on this tour. So every game is probably going to have a result. That makes 5-0 possible. I heard a few people knocking around today saying they thought 5-0 was possible. If it was 5-0, I absolutely think there would be jobs lost. I think English cricket has gone. It's put a lot behind these guys, and a lot of it was with this in mind. The general cycle is that people, we do make change after Ashes series when they don't go well. It'll be very interesting to see how Richard Gould and Richard Thompson, who are the CEO and chair, see it if it does go badly wrong, whether they decide that kind of continuity, maybe to try and break that cycle of living in the Ashes cycle, if you like. But yeah, look, if England go down like this, they've lost in 2 days here, and I know they have their moments, but there's potentially 20 more days of cricket. They're going to need to show a bit more backbone. I think some of the questions were around whether they should be going for a disciplinarian type head coach. I don't see that. I don't see. What I will say is I don't. McCullum and Stokes are unique in the way they set their. They go about things, and Key is kind of being the one who's liberated them to do it. What I don't see, even if these guys do move on, and they could move on en masse, they could move on. One or two of them could go, or none of them could go. But what I don't see is a change to the overall attitude of English cricket. To be honest, I don't see it going back to a really kind of strict vibe and dour defensive cricket, because I think we're quite a long way down this road. I'm sure a lot of fans, a lot of our readers crave of something that looks a bit tougher than what we saw today. To be honest, it looked a bit. It just looks a bit loose. But I don't see it going back to that kind of really old school disciplinarian way, the kind of flower type school of coaching. Andy Flower, of course, has changed, but when he was England coach,
I'm not sure it's changed that much, but but I don't see another captain in this team. I don't see another captain to replace Ben Stokes. So I think he'll carry on unless he doesn't want to. Harry Brooks clearly got a long way to go before you can see him as captain material, just by the way he plays. There's so much talent, but didn't take responsibility today when it was offered. Coaches and directors of cricket obviously are easier to replace. I mean, just because there are more candidates and the ECB pay superbly well, but and they can make some big offers to some big name people. But look, I wrote before the series started that these guys have made a lot of progress, and you just not throw it all out if it goes badly wrong. But of course, if it carries on with 2-day finishes and they go down 5-0, then heads will have to roll, because that's what happens on Ashes tours.
Absolutely, and as we have said before, this team wins in great fashion, but they also lose badly, and this might be the worst of the lot, but that is not completely out of character. One more question that comes from Mark, who asks, is the England player who comes out of this week with most credit Monty Panesar?
I couldn't believe he popped up in the pre-match press conference, and at that point I was thinking, God, what is Steve Smith doing here? It felt like he was bringing up something that no one had really noticed, and raking over old graves essentially. But I'm sure he gets a bit of stick from the Barmy Army, but I think every tour it gets less and less, and certainly no one in English media is talking about sandpaper really at the moment, and it's incredible. But yeah, his Australia team did him a favour. Mitchell Starc, Travis Head, those kind of guys backed it up very nicely. But yeah, Monty, he had a week in the limelight, didn't he? It's great to see.
Well, he probably had a better week than he did on his last Ashes tour for England in 13-14.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But you can read Monty's full response on the Telegraph website. Right, that's all for today. A big thanks to everyone for downloading the podcast, and to everyone who sent in a question. A big thanks to Nick and Will. Keep up to date with all their work and the continued fallout to England's defeat over on the Telegraph website. There are pieces from Jeffrey Boycott, Oliver Brown. There'll be more from Michael Vaughan as well. The next test is in Brisbane, and it gets underway in just under 2 weeks' time. We will be back before then with a full episode, including a minute monologue. Probably your turn, Will. But until then, goodbye.
Hi, Stuart Broad here. I'm here with Laithwaite's Wine, the proud sponsor of the Telegraph's Cricket Podcast. Check out my Beyond the Wicket range of wines at Laithwaite's, inspired by my memories travelling the world playing this incredible sport we love. Visit laithwaites.co.uk for more details.